Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome back to another episode of the Caspian Game Awards. Well, technically this is take 2 of this particular episode, but I'll get in that in a little bit. But we are heading into the Caspian Game Awards for 2015. But before we get into that, I just want to let you guys know I'm going to be making sure that we can start doing some more single-player playthroughs. So if that's something that interests you, make sure to hit that follow button down below and turn the bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly what I'll be streaming. Helps out a lot in the long run. And yeah, I hope to see you guys there. But of course, let's get into the meat and potatoes of what we'll be talking about with this particular Game Awards. So this is, I think, the 9th episode we've done, which is insane because we've been kicking ass with this series. And, well, let's just say that last year, for 2016, because we're going backwards in time as opposed to starting at one point to the present, 2016 was actually a really damn good year in hindsight. Like, dare I say it was definitely one of the best years in gaming history. Like, wow, like there were a lot of just amazing games that came out that year in the shooter category, in the strategy category, in the RPG category. So, like, it was a pretty packed year as far as video games are concerned. However, I was doing a bit of research for 2015 because, that got me excited. And admittedly, some of the other years that we talked about before, like 2017 and 2020, they were definitely making me pretty excited to see what was going to come up, especially when you consider the fact that those years in particular, I actually had pretty positive things to say. And, especially when you consider the fact that, like, the first couple of years that we talked about, 2021 and 2022, yeah, that was pretty rough. But as far as I was concerned, it was going to be smooth sailing. No problems at all trying to figure out what to do with a bunch of the games. And then I did my research, and it was not good. It was actually really bad. If I'm going to be honest, and this might surprise people, but I think this, like, as far as me trying to find games to represent each category, I think in hindsight, 2015 was probably not, like, one of the worst years, if not probably the worst year we're gonna cover this entire series. I know that's blasphemous for some people, especially if you have a lot of nostalgia from this era, but man, like, a lot of the games that have come out this particular year either have aged extremely poorly, had shit launches, or just, frankly, I don't particularly care about all that much to begin with. And it made it really hard for me to actually come up with anything for 2015's list. Dare I say, this one, like, I had to make the most sacrifices for. And I tried. I actually, for some of these categories, I took entire days to figure out. And I even fucked up so bad on one of the categories that I had to completely overhaul the slideshow. It was that bad. Like, no wonder why 2016 was actually a really amazing year in hindsight, because the year before that was actually fucking awful. And it actually was genuinely really bad. Like, so many just failed experimental games that nobody cares about anymore. A lot of like chapter episodic games that frankly annoys the hell out of me. That was a really common thing in this year in particular. And as far as I'm concerned, a lot of multiplayer games that just kind of fizzled out to the point where it actually was kind of depressing to look. Like, this year has aged very poorly as far as I'm concerned. And that sucks because, again, I was excited because 2016 had so many amazing classics come out that year. Civ 6, Killing Floor 2, Uncharted 4, Battlefield 1, XCOM 2. Like, many, um, so many amazing games from that year. And even 2017, whenever we covered that year with Breath of the Wild, Hollow Knight. Even though I didn't particularly nominate a game for, like, I didn't nominate Cuphead, I still give it an honorable mention. Like, I could list you so many games from 2016, 2017, and hell, I can probably list you a ton of games from 2014. But 2015 was just kind of a weird middle child. And that honestly kind of made me sad. So, God, so yeah, buckle up for this year, because it was, take it away again, Fantano.
It's not good.
So, let's get into this. But, of course, for those who are new into the stream, which I know there's some people who haven't been in here in a while, I'm not going to respond to any particular, comments. By the way, just for the formatting of the show, I do apologize. I will make sure I read comments at the end of this. But for those who don't know, this entire series is basically me kind of reassessing the Game Awards and just kind of putting my own personal takes on what should have been nominated, or coming up with more, better categories for what I personally think should be for the Game Awards. So, which, keep in mind, this was the second year of what we know as the modern Game Awards. So, I'm not going to give them too much shit on this one because, well, let's be real here. Like, because this was the second year, you still want to figure out your format. So, but as far as I'm concerned, no matter, just like with 2021 and just like with 2022, no matter what they were going to choose, it was just going to be a bad choice. So, I'm not going to give them too much shit in that regard. But, of course, let's go over the categories that we have for this particular episode. It pains me to say it, but I was not able to find enough indie games to be able to, give out the winner. Which, admittedly, that made me so goddamn sad.
What a shame.
Hear me out. It made me so upset because I want to represent the indie crowd because they're up-and-coming developers, but I just could not find enough games that either interested me or were even that good to begin with that were able to get into the nod. Though I did find just enough games by newer upcoming studios that I will be able to rank. It's just, here's the thing. To put this in perspective, the Game Awards nominated not just one, but two non-indie games, and one of them was the winner. And what's worse is that, and this is where the take two of this particular stream comes into play, I literally almost gave the win to a game that also was not an indie game. So yeah, that should tell you just how bad of a year 2015 was. If I could not find 4 games in this particular category, you know this year was bad. Holy shit. This was just awful. And, well, kind of the same thing with multiplayer games. And even DLC and expansion packs. Sports racing, that's typical. We don't usually cover that, but whenever we do, I make sure I do my research. But yeah, no, this year, that should tell you everything. I was able to scramble just enough for the other 9 categories, and truth be told, this will be the last year that we'll be doing the Remake Remaster Award, but rest assured, buckle up. But of course, let's go over the rules for those who are still new to this entire thing. So, for those who are still new. So, rule number 1. The game must have released between January 1st and December 31st of that entire year. We are not the Grammys. We do not do weird cutoff dates where we do like the last 5 months of the previous year and then like the first 7 months of the upcoming year. We're not stupid like that. We're not the Grammys.
Don't yell at me, yell at the Grammys.
Thank you, Crash Thompson. Rule number 2. The game must have had a decent to good launch. Games that are fixed after the fact will only apply by a case-by-case scenario, which in this particular case, we did not apply because I don't want to encourage bad business practices. So that's a big one for me. Rule number 3, of course, no early access games because that is not fair for the official release of said game. So there you go. Rule number 4. As far as Game of the Year is concerned, it needs to have had like generally around like an 80% or higher score for Metacritic, or just be generally, well regarded by the gaming community. And it has to be a completely new game. No remakes or remasters are allowed because that's not fair. And then last but not least, only games that I'm personally interested in will be chosen because that sort of stuff matters to me. If you disagree with me, that is completely fine. Let me know down in either the comments or in the chat to see if we can have some sort of discussion on that. But regardless, though, let's get into this. I don't want to waste any more time. Thankfully, because we're not covering as many categories, this should be a shorter stream compared to the other two, to the other streams we've done on this series so far. But man, this is going to tell you everything. So, let's go on with our first category, Best Game by a New Studio. So, of course, the best first game given that gave this particular studio's attentions, basically, is what this category is. This was not a category with the Game Awards. As a matter of fact, I was actually kind of surprised that they did not do this category. They did do indie games. But to put this in perspective, like I said, they nominated 2 games that were AA games. Basically games that were funded, where they had funding originally from a bigger publisher. I was originally going to have a game called Invisible Ink in that category. Turns out that it was a company called Clay who made that, which, if you guys don't know, also made Don't Starve, and they made another game. But point is, several other games were published by EA and Microsoft, and in 2020 they would be bought by Tencent. So not a indie studio. So that was embarrassing. We are not covering indie games. We're just going to be covering, at least in my opinion, the best games by a new studio for this year. And truth be told, I will give credit where credit is due. Some of these games are actually really damn impressive. But let's go over those. What did I end up choosing for this particular category? Well, these are the 4 games that I decided to do. One of them is kind of cheating because normally I don't particularly like the idea of a studio who worked on an already pre-established IP starting up, but I decided to make an exception with Warhammer Vermintide, but I'll get into that in a second. But first of all, let's talk about the first 2 nominees. Ori and the Blind Forest, City Skylines, of course, Warhammer End Times Vermintide, and Fran Bow. So, Ori and the Blind Forest was made by Moon Studios, I think is what their name was. They are a subsidiary of Microsoft's overarching branching, thing. And this game is fucking beautiful. Like, oh my god, this game is such a visual, bliss. I talked a little bit of like the Will of the Wisps in our 2020 video. But as far as the original game is concerned, this game is also just beautiful to look at. And as far as gameplay is concerned, it's a Metroidvania, so if you played like Symphony of the Night or the Shantae games, it's gonna feel or like even Hollow Knight, it's gonna feel, close to home in that regard. And, well, rightfully so, because as far as I'm concerned, this is definitely one of the best games in that sort of subcategory of games. And yeah, like I would definitely recommend it. Especially, I'm not going to spoil anything, by the way. That's why I'm kind of speaking in broad gestures when it comes to some of the games that I will be talking about. But for me personally, this definitely deserves a bit of a nod. Of course, that's not to snuff at the fact that we also have City Skylines, made by Colossal Order. Now, Colossal Order did actually make a few other games before this. They made Cities in Motion 1 and Cities in Motion 2, but they never really garnered that much attention. City Skylines is the first game that got them attention, and rightfully so, because this is the best SimCity game that is not SimCity. And you guys have definitely seen me stream this game plenty of times before, because it is just that cool to play. Like, it's just a modernized city builder, but with so many more streamlined things that make it way easier to get into. And just the amount of little things you can just kind of deal with here and there. It's just a fantastic play. It's just a fantastic game if you want to get into city builders. And I still think it holds up to this day. So it's a damn shame the sequel wasn't really that good, but I still find City Skylines to be really, respectable in that regard. But then we also have Fat Shark with Warhammer Vermintide 1. Again, I usually don't like choosing, because if you guys have noticed, every time I've done a best game by a new studio, I've made sure to not include games that were made by a studio where they have a pre-established license, because it just feels like cheating to me. But I had to make an exception here, because Fat Shark would eventually make Vermintide 2, which in and of its own right is a really damn good game. And the core of that game is still in the original game. Like, you can pretty much play Vermintide 1 without having to even touch Vermintide 2, and you'll still have a great time. It has, the same Left 4 Dead style of gameplay, but more melee focused. But with more of a melee focus. And, fighting off the Skaven in a infested, overrun Imperial city is, a joyride, to say the least. And it helps that the characters, obviously, it took them until the sequel to kind of figure out their, sort of tone, but you can already tell that the voice crew did have a blast with the acting in this game. No doubt about that. And as far as I'm concerned, this was definitely sort of the beginning of the sort of divergence and opening of options for other games similar to Left 4 Dead. So that is worth something, at least. And then you also have this game over here, Franbo. This is for sure an indie game, by the way. And it is sort of a point-and-click adventure game with a macabre horror twist to it. And I remember seeing a lot of Let's Players play through this game back in the day, and this game is really fucked up. Maybe at first glance you may not necessarily see it, but once you start seeing the details of the picture I have here, but then also play the game yourself, you will know exactly what I mean. And it's like I said, it's a point and click game similar to that of a lot of games from the 90s. So it takes a lot of cues from that era of gaming to kind of tell its story, and for you to be able to try to figure out what the hell is even going on in the game. So if you want a game that's about, the dangers of things like over medication or even just other themes like, dealing with the loss of, parents and trauma, but done in a way that actually is kind of similar to that of Silent Hill. I would recommend this game. It also has a bit of a whimsical sort of feeling to it in certain parts of the game, but trust me, when I say it is a horror game, it is by definition horror. So if that interests you, feel free to check it out. But of course, let's get to the winner of this particular thing. Where's my envelope? Hold on. Damn it. Where's the envelope? We can't continue this without the damn envelope. Oh no. Oh no. Where's the envelope? No. Okay. I actually need to find this. Oh shit, where did I put it? Oh no, did I throw it away? Oh, please don't tell me I threw it away. Hold on. I'll be right back. Just give me a second. I got it. Oh, okay. We got another one. I must have accidentally thrown the other one away. Shit. Okay. At least I've got another piece of paper for this, so we can still do the award. Don't worry. Trust me, this is a very important thing for me. Okay. But anyways, let's get on to the winner. And the award for the best game by a new studio goes to Ori and the Blind Forest. This might actually shock you guys, because you probably would have thought I would have chosen City Skylines. Well, yes, I really do respect City Skylines, but I do think as far as overall games are concerned, I think this is probably the better choice. I mean, like I said, this game is a gorgeous looking game. It still holds up in the visual department. Like, art direction wise, this game, chef's kiss. But also, I think because this game is because this game doesn't really have any sort of DLC tied to it, like it is a complete game from start to finish, it actually makes it easier for people to be able to access, because with City Skylines, because there's so much DLC with the game, as a matter of fact, we've nominated some of its DLC in the past, like it can be a bit daunting for people. But that's not to disrespect even just the base version of City Skylines, because it's way more playable than something like fucking Sims 4. So it's like, yeah. But in all seriousness though, I think this is the best choice, because not just because of the visuals, but also because of it, it nailed that Metroidvania gameplay. Like, and that to me signals that this team knows what they're doing. And this is a game that like any age can enjoy. Usually I don't nominate a lot of games that are rated E or E10 plus, because I mean, does it look like I'm that demographic? Because I'm clearly not. But you get the point. Is I prefer more like rated T or rated M games. So to have a game that is for this particular demographic, I think is probably the best call. And it's definitely one that I would recommend, even if, if Metroidvanias aren't your thing, I would still recommend it just for the art form itself. But let's get into the next category. Best Action Adventure. So, now this was in fact a category from the Game Awards. And we'll be covering what they chose first, and we'll be covering what I would have chosen instead. So, keep in mind, this particular category covers all the genres that you see down below right there. And what did they end up nominating? That's the real question. Well, again, I'm not going to give them too much shit this time around, but yeah, not particularly great games to represent 2015. It's about like a 50-50 split, I'd say. Ori and the Blind Forest, of course, was nominated, which, fair. That is a completely fair game for you to have chosen. Beautiful in its own right. But let's talk about the other games. The games that I for sure, like, at least either do respect or also somewhat agree with: Metal Gear Solid 5 and Rise of the Tomb Raider. Metal Gear Solid 5 is, well, let's just say it's one of the few like bright spots, in my opinion, of 2015. Like, it was really honestly one of like two games that really defined this year in particular, and for good reason. This was Hideo Kojima's last Metal Gear Solid game. It was the last true, real Metal Gear game, at least in my mind. Survival does not exist. And as far as nailing the open world aspect, the stealth aspect, the general gameplay, a lot of the side activities, and like the building up of your base and like sort of upgrading all your weapons, it's all meshed in a way that feels natural. And I can actually say that because, well, truth be told, this I actually played before Metal Gear Solid 1. Granted, my first Metal Gear Solid was 4, but I ended up later playing this one. And, well, it's pretty easy to get into, besides some weird like detailings, because Metal Gear Solid, like Metal Gear obviously being a long-running franchise that is heavy on its lore, it can get difficult for people to get like sort of into if they're playing one of the later games. So that is admittedly one flaw, is that you might get a bit lost in the story. Which, speaking of the story, okay, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself on that one, but you get the point. Is Metal Gear Solid 5, I do agree with. I am a bit hesitant as to whether it should be here or in the shooter category, because let me remind you, it is also a third-person shooter. So it's like, but we're gonna give it the benefit of the doubt, and say that, like, yes, this is definitely a solid choice. Rise of the Tomb Raider, this one is also another good choice. It's obviously continuing off of the amazing 2013 reboot, continuing off that storyline, except being set in, the Siberian tundra. So as far as, exploring like an ancient tomb is concerned, actually a pretty unique concept. Yes, we've seen Russia and like northern Eastern Europe be done plenty of times before, but sort of uncovering that side of Russian culture and Russian history, Siberian history, I should say, is pretty cool. And as far as I'm concerned, this game also has some of the best exploration in any Tomb Raider game. But I will admit I am hesitant, even more so with this game, because unlike Metal Gear Solid 5, where, well, yes, there are third-person shooting mechanics, it's not strictly a third-person shooter. Tomb Raider, at least this iteration, is a bit more focused on, like, its combat is more focused on the third-person shooter element. So, like, now, to be fair, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is obviously the threequel in this trilogy, and I nominated, spoiler alert, that was nominated for 2018's, Best Action Adventure. But after playing the 2013 Tomb Raider and just kind of thinking about it, is it more of a shooter or is it more of an action adventure? I'll leave you guys up to decide for that, but obviously, as far as I'm concerned, it's more of a shooter than it is a strict action adventure game. And then, well, we've got these other two choices here. Batman Arkham Knight and Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Oh boy. Okay. So, obviously a lot of people loved the Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. People regard them as being some of the best superhero games and just straight up the best Batman games ever. This game was broken, and I emphasize the word broken, on PC. Console was fine. Like, it had a good console launch. But this PC port was so dog shit that, like, they actually had, like, there were mass refunds. Like, it was insane. Like, people forget just how bad the PC port of this particular game was. And, well, that alone already disqualifies it for my stipulations, because I'm not promoting bad business practices of having a shit launch. Get your launches right. Like, so, hell fucking no, because of that. And also, admittedly, like, I'm not a big superhero fan to begin with anyways. Though, to be fair, I do prefer Batman over most because he's more of a detective than, or in some stories, he's more of a detective than a straight up superhero. Although I know in some stories he's leaned more towards into that, but it just depends. But you get the point. Like, even that shit launch ain't gonna cut shit with me. So, and then we've got Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which this one, okay. This one's another one that, like, I'm not particularly feeling confident on. Granted, it had a better launch than Unity, and I do think it is a overall better game than Unity. But just the actual game itself, it just feels weaker in comparison to other Assassin's Creed games that came before and even after. It does have an amazing setting, though. Victorian era London is a great setting for an Assassin's Creed game. I just wish that the characters were better written and the story was better and the gameplay was not the same repetitive bullshit that we saw in many other Assassin's Creed games. And it just, I don't know. This one is just, I don't feel fully confident in giving this game a nominee. But what ended up actually winning this category for the Game Awards itself? Well, Metal Gear Solid 5 won, which, absolutely fair. If it was going to be any of these games, it's most likely that one. But what would I choose instead? Well, I would nominate Ori and the Blind Forest again, Phantom Pain again, but also Vermintide, for the reasons I've already mentioned before, being a pretty fun sort of, alternative to Left 4 Dead. It is not a first person shooter, by the way, because yes, you do have some shooting mechanics. You're more reliant on your melee. Therefore, it counts in this category. But I'm also going to choose 2 other games, Axiom Verge and Volume. Axiom Verge is another Metroidvania, but this one is more in the classic style that you have probably are more familiar with the Super Nintendo or even early PS1 days. So you can probably tell by the art style here. And admittedly, this and Volume were going to be nominees for the indie game category, but I decided to give them the nod here. So, but anyways, Axiom Verge, another very respectable Metroidvania from this time frame, 2015, that I was able to dig up, and it has a very unsettling atmosphere, as you can probably tell by just this picture alone. Dear God, this is definitely something, for sure. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything in particular, but yeah, a very dingy sort of look. So, if that interests you, go check it out. And then we have Volume, which this game is a stealth game, actually heavily inspired by Metal Gear Solid, but more so the first 2 Metal Gear Solid games. It has that sort of, except in this case, it's more in an isometric view. And it has a very stylized look to it. It has a lot of I'd say this game has an art style that's very inspired by, I don't want to say Mirror's Edge, but it's kind of that sort of super bright white, utopia, dystopian look to it, or even the beginning of Prey. It has a very similar look to something like that. And I think it looks pretty cool. And again, since this is a stealth game, very reliant on making sure that you get past enemies without being detected. So if that's something that interests you, I would recommend it, especially from an indie studio. But of course, let's get to the actual winner for this particular category, which it should not surprise you what the winner is going to be, if it's going to be any of these, but I'm still going to do this bit anyways because I think it's funny. So, the award for the best action-adventure game of 2015 goes to Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. What else would it be? Actually, what else would it have been other than this game? As far as I'm concerned, if this ends up being the last true Metal Gear Solid game, or at least original Metal Gear Solid game, then fine. But transitioning this sort of gameplay from the more linear style that we all know and love from the older games and putting it more in an open world, it actually was translated very well. Actually better than I was anticipating. And it added a lot of quality of life improvements compared to some of the previous games. So, for example, once you get spotted, it actually has a bullet time thing to where you can actually sort of recover still being in stealth in a certain amount of time before shit hits the fan. The shooting is actually I know people complain about the shooting mechanics in this game, but I actually feel like they did it way better in this game than they did in Metal Gear Solid 4. Because Metal Gear Solid 4 had some weird shooting in that. It's kind of awkward to control. It's much better in this game. And also just sort of this, the third to first mechanic, changing mechanic or whatever you want to call it. The change of camera was done in a very snappy way. The game, of course, still has that fun stuff that is known with this franchise, and you being able to build up your base is so goddamn fun. And it helps you in the long run, not just by building up more resources, but also being able to get more upgrades, get more characters, and just getting more gadgets as a whole. And which, of course, gets us into the characters. Some of the characters that are brought back, yes, they did change their voices, but as far as I'm concerned, they did a really good job as far as emulating their voices. And obviously I'll get into the story once we get to the narrative category. But as far as I'm concerned, like, this game, especially if you look at the development history of this game, is definitely not only like the best they could have done, but they even exceeded a lot of expectations if you kind of look into the troubled, because this game did have a very troubled development history. I mean, this was, like I said, like Kojima's last Metal Gear Solid game. So, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, this is the best swan song for the franchise. If we're not counting the re-releases and the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake, which admittedly I am hesitantly excited for. Alright. So we talked about action adventure. RPGs, baby! What did this year bring to us as far as RPGs? Well, this year was like an okay year, admittedly, for RPGs. Really only carried by like a couple of titles. But, well, what did the Game Awards think as far as the games that were presented here? Okay. There are 3 really good choices here. And then there's 2 choices I don't give a shit about. Let's talk about the game. I feel like it's only fair that I talk about the games that I... Okay, no. Let's talk about the games that I do agree with being on here. Bloodborne, Pillars of Eternity, and The Witcher 3. Bloodborne, of course, is another From Software game. It's no surprise, because Game Awards love From Software, as we've established. So far, they've nominated every single From Software game that has released thus far, which is hilarious in a lot of ways. But it's understandable why, because that sort of very hard difficulty and trying, like, dying over and over again, that sort of gameplay, people like that sort of high high stakes gameplay. And as far as I'm concerned, this might sound weird, but Bloodborne actually might be one of the easy, obviously, is relative when it comes to games like this, but as far as I'm concerned, this is actually one of the easier games of that style to get into. Because this is a game I've actually played myself. I've not streamed, but I have played it. And yeah, like, as far as, like, me learning the mechanics and just sort of, like I said, getting into the groove of how like a game like this controls, I think this game did it in a pretty fair way. It's not perfect. None of these games are. But I think this game does also, not just the fact that, like, it's an easier game to get into. It's not related to any of the Dark Souls games, by the way. It's a completely original story. But it is far, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of spitting my words, because admittedly it has been a couple years since I played this game, and also my freaking throat, Basically, what I'm trying to say is this game is held up by, like I said, that more simplistic gameplay, but also its environmental detailing, because this game has also a Victorian era look to it. This 2015 had a lot of games that looked like that for some weird reason. It was just kind of the trend of that year as far as theming. Yeah, it has like a Victorian mixed with like dark fantasy look to it. And I think that's pretty cool. And it kind of, translates to its gameplay very similarly to, I'd say, something like Dark Souls. It probably feels the most similar to something like Dark Souls 3, which fair, because I think they brought a lot of the mechanics from this game over to that game. And if that's anything that's up your jam, feel free to check it out. And then we have Pillars of Eternity, which, of course, this is an Obsidian game. This was sort of the first, by this particular studio, one of their first sort of CRPGs. So like that sort of over-the-top isometric 90s RPG look. Excuse me, damn. And I mean, I gave credit to Pillars of Eternity 2, and well, Pillars of Eternity 1, I'd say, is as solid as that game in that particular subgenre of RPGs. Heavily influenced by, something like the Divinity games, and even a lot of the developers who worked on Fallout, because they originally worked on that game, and then a lot of those developers left and formed Obsidian. Of course, it's going to have some similar mechanics to Fallouts 1 and 2. And as far as like a fantasy game is concerned, it's a cool one. I'd recommend it. I know. By the way, I am ignoring The Witcher 3 on purpose. Yes, this was like the other game that took the world by storm in 2015. The Witcher 3 was everywhere. Like, this was like the 2015 version of like Elden Ring from a few years ago. But rightfully so, because obviously this continued on the Witcher storyline, which was already established with the first two games from 2007 and 2011 respectively. Geralt obviously being the main character. For those who aren't familiar with The Witcher, he's what's called a Witcher, who's kind of like a pseudo witch hunter kind of thing. It's hard to describe, but as far as I'm concerned, like, this is another contender of being one of the best games ever, period, because of its open world setting, its, depth within its quests and characters, as well as its many different multiple endings. There are like 40 endings in this game, which is insane. And I mean, we even talked about some of the DLC with this game with the previous episode. But as far as I'm concerned, The Witcher 3, like, is sort of the best. I would definitely say, like, it is arguably one of the best third-person RPGs. I don't want to say, like third-person fantasy RPGs, for sure. Like, and if that interests you, go check it out. Oh boy, okay. We're going to have to address these last two because, well, I mean, okay. Some of you guys are probably new to the channel, so I don't blame you if you guys are kind of iffy. Like, you guys are going to get mad whenever I say this. But long-term viewers of the channel know that I don't particularly give a shit about either Undertale or Fallout. In Fallout's case, by the way, Goldie is probably watching that and he's crying right now. So, because he loves this game a lot. But I was never a big Fallout fan, like, ever. I could not stand, like, the sort of 50s-esque setting that it was set in. It's just an era that I've always just thought was just very creepy and uncomfortable because of just that sort of fake happiness bullshit you see in a lot of like the media that's portrayed in this, and it also doesn't help that it was a racist as shit time. So it's like I don't like really being associated, like I just don't like that era in general. It's an aesthetic thing. I don't like the aesthetics of the 50s or 60s, or at least like Americana 50s and 60s. There are exceptions to that rule, because I'd be a hypocrite if, like, I said that, you know, I didn't like anything from that era, because I like Doctor Who, and, you know, Call of Duty Black Ops is set in the 60s, so it's like, it's just more so just the overexposure of just sort of that, golly gee, guys, like, I'm gonna go home and hang and, you know, see my wife being in the kitchen cooking up the family for, like, cooking up for the family, like that sort of Believe It to Beaver bullshit that I cringe at every time I see it. Like, and also just the 50s 60s caricature looks where they're just super, you know, basic and bland looking, with like the dotted eyes. I've always hated that shit so fucking much. Like, and what's even worse is that that sort of style has come back in recent years, which makes me kind of sad inside. Like, I don't like that shit. I think it's creepy, and but like not in a cool way creepy, like with Frambo. Frambo I think is creepy, but it's cool. This is creepy, but just in an old and uncomfortable way. And Fallout 4 is no exception. It also doesn't help that the Fallout fan base is already kind of split on this game to begin with. Because if you guys remember last year, me talking about me ranking the, you know, video game franchises, I did not put this franchise up very highly, because let's just say the only game I've heard consistent good things about was Fallout New Vegas. So every other game has had its critics in every direction. So, granted, I'm probably in the minority, especially in, you know, in recent months because of the Fallout show, because everyone's excited about that, but I don't give a shit because I don't like the setting. So I'm just stuck here, just kind of in the middle, and that is sad. So obviously, I'm not going to shit on anyone who's interested in Fallout, because, again, Goldie loves Fallout. It's one of his favorite franchises. He loves Fallout 4. But I'm sorry, Goldie. It is not the best RPG of 2015. It is not. And I'm pretty sure the next time we're going to VC, we're going to debate that. But I don't care. You're wrong. I'm right. Okay, I'm joking, but still, I don't like Fallout 4. So, or just Fallout in general. So, and yes, I am purposely also ignoring Undertale in this, but for opposite reasons for The Witcher. So, okay. So, long-term viewers know this, but I'm sorry, but frankly, I actually not only do not care, but I actually actively dislike Undertale. There's the hate. I thought I was gonna get the hate from Fallout fans, but no. I got the hate from,
What a shame.
got the hate from Undertale fans. Although, to be fair, that actually has happened before. I have gotten fucking shat on by Undertale fans back in the day. And yes, I did not like the game back then, and I still don't like the game 9 years later. It also does not help that Toby Fox kind of sold out in recent years, as far as I've heard, especially with his Deltarune project, which ended up failing. Or at least, that's kind of what I'm hearing. Frankly, I don't know. I don't think I want to know. That's a huge thing. Look it up. But you get the point. I just can't stand this game's general sort of art direction, its characters, or even its game, or even like its combat. I have never liked the idea of the game's combat being revolved around you moving basically a dot in like a grid and dodging every single attack. Yes, that is admittedly, I will give him credit for thinking outside of the box as far as combat is concerned, because that is a unique thing. I'd rather it just be a simple attack from the the enemy player though, as opposed to like this moving around your mouse around to dodge shit. Like, it just feels tedious. And well, it also does not help that, like I said, I never jived with the art direction. It's the same thing with Fallout. And this is a point that I feel like I always have to explain, because I still get motherfuckers like shitting on me because they don't understand what I'm trying to say. I don't like the look of the game. If I don't like the look of the game, I'm not gonna give a shit. That's why I don't like Fallout, and that's why I don't like Undertale. I like The Witcher because I love the high fantasy look of it. I like Bloodborne because I like the sort of macabre Victorian dark fantasy of it. Those are just like, those are aesthetics, themes, and sort of, I guess, literary genres that I prefer over the sort of cartoony, anthropomorphic, undead look, but like a cutesy form of that with Undertale. I've always disliked that shit. I've always disliked the Fallout, look of like retro punk 50s and 60s. I don't like that look. Or retro future, not retro punk, retro future. I don't like that aesthetic. And that's why I don't like Undertale or Fallout. So, I swear, if I get one more motherfucker ask me why I don't like shitting on me because they don't understand what I mean by that, I'm going to fucking scream. Because I swear, I get DMs from this a lot from people. Like, in the servers that I'm in, and I talk about why I don't like these franchises, I do get shit on for that. And it's annoying because it's like, By the way, Witcher 3 won from the Game Awards, which, fair, deserved. But what am I going to choose instead? So, Bloodborne, Pillars, and Witcher, fair choices. I'm going to keep them here. But I'm also going to nominate Xenoblade Chronicles X and Monster Hunter Generations. So, Xenoblade Chronicles was actually originally, it was nominated for 2016's Game Awards, but it was a game that came out in 2015. So it does not count for that, but it counts here. Which, as far as I'm concerned, as far as like a pseudo spin-off, it's a fair one at that. From what I can gather, though, it has a weaker story compared to Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, but you can still have a fun time in it. It has the same sort of leveling up system, gear system, all that fun stuff. So, if that sort of science fiction, fantasy look is up your alley, there you go. And, well, I wanted to give a shout out to Monster Hunter Generations as well. Granted, this is a smaller scale Monster Hunter, so don't expect this to be something like Monster Hunter World or Monster Hunter Rise. It's not really supposed to be like that, because I think this came out on the 3DS. So, but as far as a handheld Monster Hunter game is concerned, I would definitely argue that it is as good as Monster Hunter Freedom, because Generations basically sort of, it's just a fun time. It's the typical Monster Hunter thing that you see in those in the previous games, but just sort of streamlined and more modernized, especially for Western audiences, because Monster Hunter in general wasn't really all that popular in the West until World. So as far as I'm concerned, this was the right direction for Capcom to take. So, but I think I made my point on RPGs very clear with what I'm going to choose, so I'm not even going to halt this anymore. So let's just get this obvious answer out of the way. So, the winner of the best RPG of 2015 goes to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. A no-brainer choice, at least in my opinion. Some people will definitely choose Undertale, and there's going to be certain people that I know personally who are going to be upset about me not choosing Fallout 4. But I don't care, you're wrong! This is the objective answer here. Like, of course, like I said, it continues the story of Geralt, though you don't have to play the previous games to understand what's going on. You can pretty much play this game on its own. But if you play the previous games, you can still appreciate his character here. Which, of course, the open world is so goddamn beautiful. Again, I'm biased because I love fantasy games, and, well, this game has a very detailed, fantasy look, heavily inspired by Polish and Slovak culture. So it has a lot of sort of that Slavic touch as far as I'm concerned, especially coming from someone who usually does get kind of annoyed with the stereotypical medieval look of a lot of fantasy games. That sort of Eastern European, like Central Eastern European look does give it a bit more spice, and I will give credit where credit is due. And as I mentioned, there's tons of quests to do, but unlike Ubisoft quests, a lot of these quests actually have a lot of meaning and have well-written dialogue. And of course, there's tons and tons and tons of characters that you can talk to, and, even do a few little spicy things here or two with them, if you guys know what I mean. So, but in all seriousness, though, I do think that, this is probably the objective answer. And, well, truth be told, 2 out of 2 so far, Game Awards, they've actually gotten this right. Good for them. But not anymore. Because the next category is the shooter category. Dear God, this is the day that I die. Because holy shit, this was a terrible category at the Game Awards. Oh my God. This was bad. And what makes this worse is that, most of the games were also nominated for Best Multiplayer. I think there was, one game swap, but it's essentially the same list. That's probably why they got rid of this category, is because it just felt redundant. But let's go over the nominees. Dear God, it's awful. I'm just going to be frank. It's the worst. Again, I'm not going to shit on the Game Awards too much, because I don't blame them for not knowing what they could have chosen, because, well, truth be told, all of these are not very good choices. Granted, there is one that I know people are screaming at me about, saying, "Oh, why are you saying this is not a good option?" Because I don't like the aesthetics. Again, aesthetics matter to me, and if I don't like the look of the game, I'm not gonna give a shit about the game. That game is Splatoon, by the way. I don't care about the look of the game, and I've mentioned this every time we've talked about Splatoon when it got nominated with its sequels, and it's still the case here. And as far as I'm concerned, didn't this game have kind of a rough launch too? Yeah, because that's something that I do remember distinctly from around this time, is that this game had very low player numbers in the first month or two, right? Granted, I don't remember this game having the problem of server crashes or just sort of any like technical issues, but it's just not a lot of people gave a shit about this game when it first came out. Granted, that's probably partially due to the fact that this was a Wii U game, because let me remind you, the Switch still wasn't out yet. This was still during the days in which Nintendo was still trying to like double down on, well, okay, they kind of had to, because 5-year life cycle is typically the minimum for a console, so they kind of still stuck to the Wii U, that whole terrible project. So that's probably what partially contributed to that. But even then, yes, here's again, I do admire, just like with Undertale, I can at least respect that they did try something new, because this is sort of a, not really a reverse shooter, but more so a I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's basically, it's a third-person shooter where you kind of, well, you guys probably know how Splatoon works. Shoot the enemies, they don't die, they just sort of like melt, and you can also move around like through different puddles of yours and just kind of like a squid form and just kind of like, use that to your advantage. It's just a gimmick that I really don't like with shooter games, because again, I like my shooter games in whenever they are a bit more, if not realistic, at least feel somewhat close to like, reality in some sense. And I just don't like that with Splatoon. So this one's just more of a personal thing. It also doesn't help that, well, as I mentioned in the 2022 episode, there was someone in a server of mine who would not shut the fuck up about this game for a while, and it actually got really annoying. So yeah. And, well, I don't think I really need to explain these other four. It's going to be it's going to be points I've mentioned about other things in the past. Taken King for Destiny is an expansion pack. It is not a full-fledged game, therefore it feels like cheating. But also, well, Destiny. Granted, you can still, at least as the recording of this, they're probably going to, for all I know, they're going to announce they're going to shut down the servers. You can still at least purchase the entirety of Destiny 1 and play it for yourselves. I will give the game that, because you can't do that with Destiny 2. With Destiny 1 you can, but it is an older game. It's 10 years old. So I don't know how much longer the servers for Destiny 1 are going to be held up. For all I know, like I said, they might announce the servers will shut down in like a year or two, or even this year. Because Destiny 2 kind of took over a lot of the content from this game. So, yeah. That's why this one is especially iffy in that regard. But the problem with Halo 5 Guardians and Star Wars Battlefront 2015 is that they're just straight up terrible games. Like, they're just straight up
Not good.
They're dog shit. The worst mainline Halo game. May I remind you, a game that, well, again, they did change the formula a little bit with this game, but this game had so many stripped features when it first launched. It didn't come out with a Forge mode until, like, several months afterwards, even though Halo 3 and Halo Reach, and I'm pretty sure even Halo 4 came out with Forge mode day one, like that. So, no excuse in that regard. And, I mean, well, if you want to count this as part of, the whole category of, okay, well, no, we're not talking about multiplayer. We're talking about the fucking, shooter games. We're not talking about multiplayer here. This has the worst campaign in all Halo. Like, easily. Like, again, let me remind you that, like, this was the game. I'm not gonna give a shit about spoilers, by the way. If you do, shut the fucking like mute until like you see the fucking winner pop up for this. This game was the game that did a huge character assassination of Cortana. May I remind you? And it basically forced you to play as Locke for most of the game. Who, by the way, doesn't return in Halo Infinite. He doesn't get brought back in Halo Infinite. He's just a one-time character. And you get to play as Chief in 3 missions. 3. Like, that is an epic fail of huge proportions. And also, let me remind you of the false advertising with this game. This game, like, Microsoft got sued because of the false advertisement in the game. Like, people were pissed about that shit. So, yeah, no. As far as I'm concerned, hell fucking no with this game. Easily the worst Halo game. And I can say that because I'm a diehard Halo fan. I play all the Bungie era games in the past 4 years for you guys. And I cried at the end of Halo 3. That's how much I fucking love Halo. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is literally not only the worst Halo to have released thus far, but also one of the worst AAA first-person shooters ever. I'm not going to say worst first-person shooters, because there's objectively worse games, but holy shit. No. Hell no with this category. And also, hell no to fucking Star Wars Battlefront 2015. This game actually felt like I was ripped off. Because Star Wars Battlefront 2, again, another franchise that I love to death. Star Wars Battlefront 2, 2005, is amongst one of my favorite games of all time. It's my 3rd favorite game of all time, right behind Minecraft and the Sly Cooper games. I fucking love that game so much. And to finally have like another, AAA big budgeted Star Wars Battlefront game. Yeah, there were the PSP games from the late 2000s, but as far as most people's perspective, the first new game in this franchise in a decade, that was exciting. Like, just the possibilities of playing Galactic Conquest again and playing on so many planets, and just the amount of new units and heroes. It was like an amazing concept at the time. Unfortunately, this game was a shell of what it should have been. Only 4 planets at launch. Only being able to play as the Empire or the Rebels. Having, very little variety in game modes. Basically just kind of devolving either into team deathmatch matches or Walker Assault matches for the entire experience. Yeah, there were other modes, but nobody fucking gave a shit about those modes, other than heroes or villains. So it's like... And putting more... This is the most insulting part. Let me remind you that this game put in more effort in a stupid fucking diorama mode than it did in literally this game put more effort in its diorama mode, in its stupid fucking emotes, than it did the actual, than to develop more maps for this game. That is embarrassing. That's actually one of the saddest things ever. So yeah, no, as far as I'm concerned, this is another, contender for being one of the worst AAA first-person shooters. As far as I'm concerned, one of the worst AAA games in period. This game sucks. And I stand by that. This game is actually fucking dog shit. It's terrible. Like, I will defend its sequel, because at least they somewhat fixed it. Granted, it's still not as good as the first 2, the original Battlefront games. But at least tried. This game did not. So, hell fucking no. I can't in good like the if you actually genuinely think that like Halo 5 or Star Wars Battlefront 2015 deserve a nod on here, I don't know what else to tell you other than like you're out of touch. You are out of touch. And then, well, we got Black Ops 3. This one's a complicated one because, yes, this game's zombies mode is a fucking 10 out of 10. As far as I'm concerned, it is probably the second best zombies just behind Black Ops 1, in my opinion. Like, being all, like really held up by its amazing maps like Shadows of Evil, The Rising Drac, Rod Crovey. Like, those are amazing maps. And the fact that this game has custom zombies, and those have produced some of the best experiences ever, including a lot of the remakes and remasters that people have been doing for this game. Like, for the, from previous games, I should say. That's pretty awesome. And even incorporating elements from Black Ops 4 and Cold War into a lot of those custom maps. That's awesome. But notice how I mentioned zombies is amazing. The campaign, the multiplayer, whatever the fuck Nightmares was, and free run. Now, in good conscience, I can't put this on the list because it's only like a third of a good game. The campaign is so goddamn convoluted that like it will actually make the Zelda timeline and the Metal Gear Solid timeline and even the FNAF timeline look fucking tolerable in comparison. And the multiplayer, people are going to shit on me because unfortunately they were born in 2009 and don't actually know good game design. I swear, this game's multiplayer actively pissed me off every time I played it. It's one of those Call of Duties that I never had fun in. The wall jumping mechanics and the sliding, I will admit, are better than Advanced Warfare's. But they break the fundamentals of the game design of Call of Duty. Why? Because the maps that were made with that movement in mind were way too small. Like, I can't think of like one genuinely good map in this game that wasn't ported from a previous Call of Duty. I genuinely can't, because I get, maybe Combine, but like that's about it. Every other map is terrible. Well, even Combine has its fucking issues. It doesn't help that like the kill streaks in this game are kind of fucking annoying. And don't even get me started on the specialists. I never liked specialists. Honestly, that was my biggest pet peeve about this game. Well, that and the fucking black market supply drop loot box bullshit. The specialists actually broke the game. And I still stand by that. I hated it back then, and I still fucking hate it now. This game, like, it didn't need specialists. They like, and I don't like them in this game. I don't like them in Infinite Warfare, and I don't like them in BO4. I'm so happy they actually nerfed specialists to just being equipment in Modern Warfare 2019 onwards. Like, they had them in World War II, but only in zombies. But you get the point, is that specialists were not fun to deal with. And don't even get me started on the fucking black market, which this game was pay to win. Dude, there's more guns in the there's more guns locked behind a paywall than there are base guns in the game. That's actually terrible. So that alone already is a big no for this game. But combined with all the other things I've talked about that makes this wrong, I can't nominate this game. I would like to, if this game was only zombies, then okay, to put this in perspective, if let's say if Black Ops 3 had, instead of the campaign that it had the campaign of Infinite Warfare, and it had a very similar multiplayer like aesthetic to that of BO4's, but had the same gameplay of either, you can choose either BO2 or Cold War. Then that would be, honestly, that would probably be the best Call of Duty ever, if I'm going to be honest. Like, because I thought the Infinite Warfare campaign was actually pretty good. Way better than this shit. At least Ethan was a good character. Who the fuck? And that's my other thing. Name me a single character, like, from Black Ops 3's campaign. You can't. Because they're all terrible. So, that's my point. So, massive fucking L as far as I'm concerned. Again, zombies is the only good thing about Black Ops 3. Halo 5 has no good shit in it at all. And Battlefront 2015 is an embarrassment. So, as far as I'm concerned, no matter what would have been chosen on here, it would have been a bad choice. Obviously, like, they chose Splatoon, which I really don't like, but at the same time, this is just a case where, again, the Game Awards just always they just always have the problem of choosing just the worst games for multiplayer. Obviously, we're talking about the shooter category, but the multiplayer category for this year was literally the same exact thing. So, as far as I'm concerned, this was just they had, unfortunately, they just had a bad card that they had to have played. So, let's fix this. Because there are definitely better games that came out this year. And, well, let's start with a very little known game called Helldivers. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the original Helldivers came out in 2015, which it garnered mild success. Obviously, Helldivers 2 took the world by storm this year, 2024. But the original game is respectable in its own right. Now, it is not a first-person nor a third-person shooter. It's actually a top-down shooter, like top-down shoot-'em-up style, which still counts for this list. And as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, this game is really fun in that regard. It's made by the same developers, by the way. Also the same developers of another game called Magica, which may or may not be in another future list, and wink, nudge, nudge. But as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, like, this game is fun. Like, granted, obviously, it doesn't have the same exact systems as Helldivers 2, because it's a very different game. But if you want, like, a fun, couch co-op sort of top-down shooter, this is actually one of the better ones I've ever played. So, yeah, no, check it out. Like, especially if you kind of want to familiarize yourself with the origins of where Helldivers came from. So, and trust me, like, when it comes to these franchises with sequels that blow up way bigger than the original games, this is actually one of the better ones. It's not like with Team Fortress, where it's like Team Fortress 2 is amazing, but nobody talks about the first game because it's kind of rough in some areas. It's not like that at all. You can still play this game as much as the sequel. And, well, speaking of sequels, Wolfenstein: The Old Blood. Okay, this one's weird, because it's like, it's not a remake, but it's kind of it's like a reimagined telling of, like, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, or at least there's very similar beats to that game, but obviously being set in the Machine Games timeline, the same timeline as the New Order, New Colossus, those games. And, well, as sort of a prequel to the New Order, it's really damn good. Like, yeah, it's shorter, but you're able to mess with, like, a lot of the weapons that were in the beginning of that game a bit longer in this, as well as some other new toys. and you even get to experience a bit more of that classic Wolfenstein feel. I'm not going to spoil anything in particular. You guys play it for yourself. But yeah, it does kind of bring back some of those like old elements from Return to Castle Wolfenstein in a much more modern and up-to-date way. And well, I think this game succeeds in a lot of with flying colors. So yeah, no, definitely check it out if you want a bit more of like sort of a backstory of the New Order. And okay, obviously you also see Rise of the Tomb Raider here. I admittedly kind of had to fill up the shooter category, but I already said this feels more like a shooter game anyways. We can definitely have the discussion on whether it's an action adventure game or just a strict third-person shooter. But as far in this particular case, I'm going to argue for it being a shooter. And well, like I said, it's a really good game in its own right, and I would definitely recommend it. So, and well, last but not least, we've got Just Cause 3. Excuse me. Now, this game came out, unfortunately, right at the tail, like, right just a little bit after the sort of the deadline in air quotes for the Game Awards. So this came out, I think, in like late November, early December. So yeah, it wasn't able to make the cut, but I still think this game is a lot of fun. I do remember I did actually stream this, like, not stream, I made videos using footage of this a couple times because this game's fun. Like, you know, like, you're obviously Rico Rodriguez going back to his home country, trying to liberate it from a dictator. And this game is just a lot of fun. Just Cause in general is always, or at least with 2 and 3, have always been really good with sort of the raw shooting and the movement. This game has such good movement because this game introduced the glider, which makes moving around the island so much fun. And of course, just like any other open world, shooter game like this, you have tons of weapons that you have access to, tons of objectives. But honestly, yes, it does get repetitive sometimes, I will admit, but unlike something like Assassin's Creed, I never get bored with this game. This game allows for so much creative freedom, very similar to a game like Red Faction Guerrilla, where you can pretty much just take out any sort of location that you want with the tools that you have. And that sort of freedom is what I love about Just Cause 2 and 3 in particular. Like, oh my god. I'm sorry. Admittedly, I am slightly biased because, again, this is another game that I do remember playing for you guys way back in the day, like 2016, 2017, 2018 even. But regardless, I just go play it for yourselves. If you want like a game that is sort of like a mix between, think of it as like a mix between like GTA and like Far Cry. I know it's a weird mix, but that's essentially what Just Cause is. I would definitely recommend it to you guys, for damn sure. But of course, let's get into my personal winner of the best shooter game. Before I do that, I'm gonna blow my nose. Okay. Shit. Okay. Sorry, my nose is just getting stuffy. Although we are technically getting it into the end of spring, so. But let's go over the winner. So the winner of the best shooter game of 2015 goes to Just Cause 3. Yeah, I'm biased with this one, but I don't care. By the way, I used to think I remember way back in the day when Just Cause 2 came out, like I remember my cousins used to think that it was Just Cause 2. Which is really funny because we would because of that we would always just say just cuss too, just cuss, you know. This is I'm sorry, that was really just a funny story, but anyways. This game, honestly, if I'm gonna be honest, you can argue whether Just Cause 2 or Just Cause 3 is the better game. I'm going to argue that Just Cause 3 is better, mostly because, like, as far as I'm concerned, the shooting feels way better in this game. It's a lot more snappy. And because it uses an auto-aim system, you can easily kill guys like that. You can turn that off if you want to, but as far as I'm concerned, this game has really fluid shooting controls. Like I said, the map is so much fun to travel around, especially when you use the grappling glider combo. Like, that's so much fun to do in this game. And well, being like as an open world, there's tons of stuff that you can do, tons of challenges, and like I said, it's just dumb fun. Like, it's just one of those games where it's one of those games. Usually, I don't like the idea of games just shut your brain off. Like, I like my more thought-provoking games. And while this game has a bit of a, like, it's an okay story. It's not like the best. You know, it's your typical sort of, you know, overthrowing the evil dictator storyline that we've seen in countless games before. Definitely, especially in other games, which is where I make the Far Cry comparison to. But if you just want like a dumb, fun action game, fuck yeah, play Just Cause 2 or 3. I'm throwing in 2 just kind of because like that game's also pretty good in its own right. Granted, 2010, so obviously for that list. But for 2015, this was a good nod to kind of end that year, because admit it and help set the tone for what 2016 was going to bring to us, as far as I'm concerned. So, all right, best sim strategy. So, yeah. This should not surprise you that this was kind of another iffy category to kind of figure out. I barely found any games that would have been able to qualify for this. And even some of the ones I picked, I'm iffy on even. Again, that should just tell you just how bad of a year 2015 was. And why 2016 was such an important year in gaming. Because, like, God, there were so many bad games. Admittedly, I actually don't remember. Did the Game Awards have? No, they did not. Okay. So, yes, there's Invisible Ink. So, I think I should explain that one first, because whenever I was doing this particular take, I almost gave this the win for best indie game, but then I did my research and figured, oh, Mark the Ninja, that was the other game that Clay made. They made Mark the Ninja and Don't Starve. Problem is that Mark the Ninja was a Microsoft-backed game. Therefore, they are not an indie game by my definition, because they had backing from a major publishing studio. Because once you get that money rolling in, are you really a small company at that point? No. So, but it's still a respectable game. It is actually a stealth strategy game, which is a very weird sort of category of games, but it's a cool one nonetheless. Basically, like, it's a turn-based strategy game where you still have to kind of hide behind like a bunch of enemies. A lot of stealth games, by the way, this year, which cool, because I like stealth games. But anyways, as far as I'm concerned, like, this one does it in a pretty unique way, because like I said, it's turn-based stealth, and that's a pretty unique concept, and it has a very unique art style to boot, because it has sort of that like slick sort of cyberpunk look to it. I guess cyberpunk-ish. But you get it. It has a really cool look. And I do appreciate this sort of art direction way more than something that's just straight up 50s or 60s looking. Like, you can tell it's inspired by that era, but it's not strictly that era. So that's cool. And then, well, obviously City Skylines is getting nominated again because, again, I think that game is pretty damn good in its own right. Even just bare bones, unlike other games that have a shit ton of DLC, you can play this game without any DLC. You can still have a ton of fun. I know I play vanilla all the damn time, and I think I've only streamed this game with the DLC maybe once. So if I have fun doing it, that should prove to you how damn good of a base game this is. So, and yeah, I have a lot of fun with this. Another game that I actually do remember streaming a couple times, and I even tried doing a bit of a series on my YouTube channel for, back when I had the very shitty computer, is Total War Attila. Now, this is a game that I'm very iffy on, because, well, I guess it had a way better launch than Rome 2, because Rome 2 had a dog shit launch, if you guys remember back in 2013. And while, yes, like, this is a unique setting for a game because it takes place during sort of the fall of the Roman Empire going into the Dark Ages. So, and while it's following Attila the Hun. So, as far as, like, I'm concerned, like, unique premise is pretty cool. And, you know, I want to say unique premise, but just sort of unique time setting for a Total War game. And also it being kind of the last, true, in a lot of people's eyes, historical Total War game. It could have been worse. This game is just kind of frustrating to play, though, because it really just depends on which faction you're playing as. Like, if you're trying to play as, like, Rome, you're going to have a fucking hard time to do it. But if I'm going to be honest, same thing with, like, the Hun factions. It's just super unbalanced in that regard. And it doesn't help that diplomacy is basically non-existent. Everyone is a fucking asshole to you in this game. And it makes it super frustrating if you want to just play, like, in a pacifist way. You have to basically conquer everyone else. Otherwise, which is weird because, like, the game is trying to be a sort of empire building game, but with systems where a lot of empires were lost. You can probably tell where the problem is. Like, maybe there's probably a reason why this era wasn't really covered in games to begin with, because maybe it wasn't the best era to do a grand strategy game for, because it would just be more frustrating if you want to go with historical accuracy in this one. So, yeah, I mean, it's not the worst Total War game. As a matter of fact, like, I actually do still respect this game. It's just, it's going to be hell frustrating if you try to play this game without any sort of guide. Like, if there's any Total War game that I will definitely say requires a guide, it's definitely this one. So, yeah, that's where my hesitancy comes from. So, though, from what I've seen, people do generally like this game, so they like it more than Rome 2, so that's worth something. So, yeah. I'll leave it here. And then we've got Forza Motorsport 6, which was, in a lot of people's eyes, a sort of return to form after 4 and 5 kind of disappointed a lot of people, at least from what I've heard. So, And people do regard this being the best Xbox One Forza game. So, which is worth something. So, again, more of a sim than it is a strategy game. Well, I mean, City Skylines is a sim game, but like, and I guess I'm kind of being very loose with the definition of sim since this is just a straight up racing game. But again, let me remind you guys, this is 2015. Do you think there's really any good sim games from this year? No. So, yeah. But let's go over the winner anyways. It should be pretty damn obvious, just like with the previous things as to which is going to win. But let's do this anyways. So, the winner of Best Sim/Strategy Game goes to City Skylines. I love this game. I love this game so much. I think I put this in S tier in the tier list of games that I've actually played for you guys before, which was an incomplete list, by the way. There were games I completely forgot about, like adding. Maybe a new list in the future, who knows. But I love this game in a lot of ways, because, again, it brought back city builders during a time when city builders were just kind of gone. Because, like, I mean, yeah, there was Tropico that was still kind of hanging around, but those weren't really mainstream, if that makes sense. There was SimCity 2013, but that game sucked with its always online bullshit. And Anno had its worst game released this year. This was the year of Anno 2205. So, as far as I'm concerned, not only was this sort of the true return to form for city builders, but also, in my opinion, it's actually the best city builder ever made. Like, that's how much I love this game. And it's for a lot of reasons. Of course, there's tons of stuff for buildings themselves. You can rename them, you can demolish them, you can do all sorts of stuff with them. It has a more refined and modernized gameplay feel because its systems were built straight from SimCity 4 of all games, which of course was an isometric game, but it was basically, this game is basically just SimCity 4 if it was 3D. And that's kind of how I would describe this game. And it translates very well in that regard. And it also is very stress-free in a lot of ways. And here's a bit of a hot take from me. As far as Paradox Interactive published games, I think this is the best game they've ever published. I love this game. Like, again, I love this game so much. Like, you guys can probably already tell. And of course, well, as a bit of a bonus, mod support, baby. Always gotta love it. But let's move on, because admittedly, I kind of want to speed this up a bit. So, remakes and remasters. Like I said at the beginning, this is actually going to be the last year that we'll be covering this particular category. Because, I mean, not only because I feel like it would be just kind of disingenuous if we kept doing this, but also 2013, 2014 was kind of the beginning of when we started seeing a lot more of these. I'd say the first remaster, actually funny enough, that I do remember hearing about was the Sly collection, like the Sly Cooper collection back in 2010, followed up by the Splinter Cell collection, and then all the other ones that were released on PlayStation 3. So, like, yeah, Sly Cooper kind of started that trend, for better and for worse. I hate you for that, but I can't stop loving you, god damn it. But you get the point, is we're getting closer to the era where it's like there's not really full-on remakes, and these are just refurbishing of a bunch of games. And I feel like just kind of getting close to the middle of the decade is only fair to finally just kind of get this category out of here. But what did I end up choosing? Well, I chose the Majora's Mask HD, Homeworld Remastered Collection, Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, the Gears of War Ultimate Edition, and the Uncharted Nathan Drake Collection. And there's some of these games do have some gameplay changes. Majora's Mask had changed a few of the mechanics from the original version. Homeworld, I think, changed Homeworld 1 to where it feels more like a remake than it does a remaster. And Gears of War Ultimate Edition obviously adds in all the content from the first game, including all the DLC. But these are basically just all, other than those, these are just all basically the same games that released back in their respective years. So because of that, I don't really know if it feels comfortable for me to continue doing this if we're going closer and closer to the beginning of the decade, if that makes sense. I'm more than willing to do this for 2024 if we decide to do 2024. But yeah, I just don't really know about these. I mean, these are all decent options, but keep in mind, I may or may not be talking about a lot of these games once I get to their respective years. Just a bit of another hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge over there. That's all I gotta really say about all these games. Just go watch our future videos on this, which I know is kind of a spoiler for a lot of this, but honestly, it should be kind of obvious that a lot of these games are going to be nominated at some point, because I played all the Uncharted games. I have a bit of respect for Gears of War and Devil May Cry, and I've been getting into Zelda as of late. So in Homeworld, I think it's pretty cool in its own right. So definitely check out those reviews. Just make sure that it's gonna definitely be months from now for at least a few of these. But in any event, let's get on what I'm gonna personally choose. So, the best remaster of 2015 will go to the Uncharted Nathan Drake Collection. I mean, it's the version I played on stream. Uncharted's 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, those were the versions I played. Hell, I own it physically back there on my shelf. So it's yeah, look. So it's admittedly, this is kind of the default, the de facto choice, considering it's literally a game I streamed. But I do, even just kind of putting that inherent bias aside, I do think this is actually a good game for it had to have been chosen, because of course it contains all the single player content, rest in peace the multiplayer content, from the first 3 Uncharted games. It actually brings the games to a higher resolution, cleaned up some of the the coloring to make it look more visually appealing, because again, this is the late 2000s, early 2010s. We're talking about the era of grays. So kind of adding more vibrancy was nice, change of pace. And, well, this is the most easily accessible way to play the games. Although, to be fair, at a lot of the retro game stores I've been to, you can still pick up the original versions for dirt cheap. So it's it's not like it's required, but if you wanted the option, if you guys wanted to play this on PS4 or even PS5, it's a pretty easy collection to get into. But, well, let's get into the categories that truly matter. Best Art Direction. Funny enough, the Game Awards did not actually give this a category. I actually was kind of shocked. I was actually kind of not expecting them to have not really cared about art direction in their early years, or at least the early years of the modern Game Awards. So it's like, yeah, what could have been chosen? Well, I think I came up with a few answers. And oh wait, I'm stupid. They did come up with art direction. I was thinking of 2014. Okay. But these were the games that were chosen. I mean, you guys know me. I personally don't like more realistic games kind of being chosen for this, because it just feels kind of like weird, because it feels like it's just more them focusing on the graphical fidelity rather than the actual visual style of the game. So if I'm gonna be honest, this might sound weird, but The Witcher 3, Batman Arkham Knight, and Metal Gear Solid 5, honestly, I don't think are good choices for this category. I respect the hell out of The Witcher 3 and Metal Gear Solid 5, but I don't know if this was the best category. Because, again, they're more realistic looking. And unlike something like Devil May Cry, where there's, like, visual, like, things you can point to, those games don't really have something like that, you know? Now, Bloodborne, Ori, I do agree with being on here. Again, Ori's a beautiful looking fucking game. Like, and again, it's a very sort of stylized look. And with Bloodborne, well, yes, it has like, you know, humans and it has sort of that realistic like look. Its visual designs alone make it more worthy to be chosen because of its gothic tone and its sort of general atmosphere. What ended up winning? Ori. Fair. Absolutely fair choice. But what could I have chosen instead? City Skylines and Invisible Ink. City Skylines, like, it has a very sort of like retro future kind of look to it. Not retro future. Like, it has like a very like cleaned up modern look that has a bit of a cartoonish tint to it. And I think it's fine. Like, it, you know, you can kind of mistake it for like, you know, real life, but you could tell it is a very stylized looking game in a lot of ways. So I think this is more than enough of a worthy contender for at least best art direction. And you know what? Invisible Ink, I mean, the cover shows it all. Like, and the game itself, obviously being more, it's going to look 3D in comparison to this, but it has a, like, it continues that sort of distinct sort of sci-fi look to it that I do think actually makes this a bit more of a contender. So, but admittedly, I am kind of rushing this, but that's only because admittedly I do kind of want to get this finished. But let's end up choosing the winner for best art direction. So, the award for the best art direction of 2015 goes to... Shit. Bloodborne. Yeah. This one's only fair. Although, to be fair, Ori is a second choice. But I just like the look of this game. Because, again, it has that Victorian, gothic, dark fantasy look to it. And I like that sort of dingy feeling to it. Because, like, yeah, it's dingy, but you can tell that it's still visually, like, inspired. And I don't know. Like, it's also kind of weird. Because, like, yes, you can tell that, like, if you look at the game, you can definitely tell that it is, like, a From Software game. Like, it is a Souls-like game. But even just despite that, it still is more distinct. Because obviously with Dark Souls, Demon Souls, and with Elden Ring, they are dark fantasy games. You can easily tell, like, what type of setting they're in. And while Bloodborne still kind of has a similar motif, you can tell that it is different because of that sort of early, early modern look to it, that Victorian Gothic look. And I think that at least makes it visually stand apart in comparison to the other From Software output of that style. And I think it works pretty well. So that's at least my pick. Though I will admit, Ori is still a pretty good choice. Alright. Best narrative. Jesus Christ, this is gonna get bad. You thought, okay, the multiplayer, look at the shooter category is the absolute worst. This is the second worst, though. Boy, oh boy, it's time to buckle up on this one. So, we're reaching the end. We're getting close to the end. So, okay, I'm not going to waste your time. What's the best narrative? Oh God. Oh my God. This is so bad. This is so bad. Oh my God. Okay. I mean, it should be obvious. It's Witcher 3. It's Witcher 3. It's Witcher 3. Witcher 3 out of all of these. It's so much. It's the obvious answer. It's the obvious answer to all of these. Because Telltale sucks. Life is Strange sucks. Her story looks stupid. And Until Dawn is a stupid, basically non-game. All these games, most of these games are just non-games. Okay, I am flipping my shit, but there's a reason for that. 2014, 2015, and a little bit of 2016 was the era of the interactive movie games, which are games I personally can't fucking stand. Basically, for those who don't know what those those types of games are, they're basically less game and they're more just interactive movies. Like, they might as well just not be called games, if that makes any sort of sense. And like, I've always found that to be just so pretentious in a lot of ways. Especially in a couple of these fucking games. Oh my God. So, but you get sort of what I'm trying to say. Is like, I actually do genuinely hate these types of games. Because it's like, if you wanted to make a movie, then why not just make a fucking movie? Like, which one of these practically is because they use live footage. So, but okay. Let's go. Okay, I'm not even going to explain why The Witcher is the best. I already explained why. Let's talk about the rest of these. Okay, so, Tales from the Borderlands. Well, as you see with the subtitle, it is a Telltale game. And, well, I've noticed some people in chat were pointing out this is the peak of Telltale. Well, okay, I've been pretty vocal about it. I was vocal about this plenty of times before. I don't like Telltale games at all. Like, you can boo all you want, but you don't know where I fucking live, so you can't try to figure out where you can kill me. But I have always hated the idea of Telltale games in particular because, like I said, they were the ones that basically kind of, them and David Cage, they were the two sort of forces that led this wave of
not games, essentially. And it doesn't help that, like, the stories of a lot of Telltale games, they barely change in any like the endings don't really change all that much. Like, okay, I'm gonna fucking ruin Telltale games for you guys, and this is something I've definitely talked about with Goldie and even Simori. Telltale games are kind of false advertised games. What do I mean by that? They always advertise, and I mean always advertised, that your choices matter because, you know, you'll have like a different result if you kind of, you know, if you decide to do one thing and then, well, there's consequences to that. Okay, fair enough. David Cage was able to do that with the Heavy Rain game, with Heavy Rain. So why am I complaining specifically about Telltale? Because, well, your choices are eventually nullified later on in the game regardless. So, for example, let's take their most popular game, Walking Dead Season 1, for example. And I'm going to spoil this shit, by the way, because I don't give a shit about Walking Dead. I'm just using it as an example. So, in Walking Dead, there are multiple instances where you have to choose whether or not you can save one character or if you have to save another, right? Well, what if I told you that what ends up happening is if you save one of those characters and, well, that other character dies, the character that you saved eventually dies in the story anyways. So their life doesn't fucking matter. Your choice doesn't actually matter in the game. And you know what happens if you end up saving that other character? They also die! So, like, it's a fake choice game. Like, and honestly, it results in bad writing. Like, that's writing 101. Like, again, it basically just makes you, like, once you know that secret, it basically makes you wonder what's even the point in playing a Telltale game if literally what's going to happen in the story is inevitable anyways. And that's every single one of their games. Every single one of their games. I've checked the scripts for Walking Dead games, Game of Thrones, this game right here, Tales of Borderlands, the Batman game that they did. All of their games are the fucking same. Like, I don't understand why people praise them as much as they do when literally their writing is extremely shallow and it's, like, at worst, blatant false advertisement. Granted, to be fair, there was a really funny joke. There was only one good joke in this game. The finger pointing scene. That's the only funny part about this game. But to be fair, that could have been in Borderlands 2, and that would have been fine. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I can't in good faith give this a nod. Even though that's cool, that's only one scene out of, like, what, a 10-hour game? So, L. And, well, speaking of L's and the franchise that starts with it, Life is Strange. Yeah, this game starts with an L because this franchise is a massive L. So, okay. I'm sorry. I really don't like Life is Strange. I mean, Goldie hates Life is Strange. I'm not at that same level, but it does feel very pretentious. Like, a lot of the games just feel forced or just even just straight up fake. It's like all these characters are just kind of like it's the fake sad type that I can't I just can't stand with a lot of these characters. And again, this is just another example of a game it's more of a movie than it is a game. Yeah, there's the there's the time travel mechanic, but like that's it. And again, it doesn't help that I don't like games that are more small scale like this. It's always been something that I never gave a shit about. I've always been more interested in science fiction or fantasy stories. These more smaller scale sort of interpersonal stories I have always just got super annoyed with, in video games in particular. TV shows, that's a completely different fucking story. Like, I would be lying to you if I said that Hey Arnold wasn't one of my favorite fucking shows ever. I fucking love Hey Arnold. But this ain't something like that. Obviously, because I'm pretty sure this is a rated M game, but either way, I don't care about those types of games. And Life is Strange, especially, I can't stand. And it also doesn't help that like this was an episodic game. Which, speaking of, wasn't Tales from the Borderlands also episodic? See, like I hate. That's another thing I can't stand. Like, stop making your games episodic. Just release the whole game when it's ready. I don't get that. I don't get that. Like, oh my god. So yeah, no, fuck that shit. Those games are too big L's. You know what else is big L? Her Story. A game that really should just be a movie. It's another, again, one of those interactive movies that where it's like, your choices matter. But in this case, it's about someone being convicted in prison and them trying to prove their innocence. But it's kind of done in like a very cringy sort of way. And it also helps that like I am not a big fan of games that like use live action footage as their basis for their storytelling. Like, the only exception to that rule are the Command and Conquer games, but that's only because they're funny. Like, every time that there's like, actual physical actors in a game, especially in a lot of games from like the 90s and early 2000s, I just cringe at. There's a reason why people did not like Quantum Break from 2016. Because they did that shit, and it was dumb. And it's the same case here. So, no. And then we've got Until Dawn. Which, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, by the way, this was made by the same developers who did the Dark Pictures anthology. So, yeah, has a very similar sort of tone to that. I will admit, I feel like out of these interactive movie games, this one's probably the one that did it the best. But I still would not nominate it for Best Narrative. Because again, it just makes me wonder, why didn't you just make this into a movie? Like, and this was a PlayStation 4 exclusive for the longest time. It just got a PC release. I mean, just got, I think, literally like a day or two ago. Let me double check. Or it's at least going to get a PC release. Okay, it didn't just come out. It's going to get one. Excuse me. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, yeah. By the way, The Witcher didn't win. Her Story won. So, do I need to say anything else? Let's just go over the picks that I ended up choosing. Witcher 3, of course, is staying. Frambeau is staying as well. Or Frambeau is going to be here. Mainly just because, sorry, my nose is fucking runny. Freaking allergies, damn. Fran Bow is, I mean, I talked about it at the beginning with best game by a new studio. And, I mean, this is a way more interesting story. Because, well, to not spoil anything, because I don't want to spoil anything to you guys, you're following, little girl, Fran Bow, where she's basically escapes like a mental hospital after a tragic incident involving her parents. And you kind of slowly uncover the truth about what the hell is even going on as you go through the game. And, well, like I said, in a very similar way to Silent Hill, it makes you question whether or not things that are happening are real or not. So it does that sort of psychological horror thing, while tying it into things like mental health as well as family trauma and just kind of dealing with that pain. That is something that I think is pretty cool, and like it does it in a sort of macabre way. So, and granted, there is no voice acting. It's all done through text, but still, it is, or at least initially, did they add voice acting? I don't think they did, but regardless, it's pretty cool, especially as far as like point and clicks are concerned. So if that's something that interests you, go check it out. And then we've got Metal Gear Solid 5, which this is where my narrative thing comes into play that I was kind of teetering around when it came to this game. Because I know a lot of people do have problems with this game's story. And, well, truth be told, it does have problems. Specifically when it comes to specifically in a few areas. Number one, the main villain. And number two, sort of the retcons that they made for certain characters. I will definitely agree. Those two things kind of... Oh, and also the fact that like it feels like this game was cut shorter than it should have been. So in those three aspects, I can definitely agree that like this one's another sort of teetering on the line sort of game. And again, kind of proves my point that 2015 in hindsight was a very bad year for video games. I mean, notice that a lot of these categories, I only had 4 choices. It was hard for me to choose 4 as the minimum, because that's the minimum I want to make sure I have. So it's like, this one is kind of more of an obligation to put on here, especially considering that, like, it's a Hideo Kojima game. Yeah, it's very respected for his storytelling. So as far as I'm concerned, like, yes, this is definitely the weakest story, but that's not to say that it is a bad story. The story that it tells, I think, is pretty respectable. And a lot of the characters that do surround Big Boss here, I think, are pretty cool. And they kind of are done justice. So in those aspects, yeah, I honestly would say that, like, even though that this game does have some iffy moments, I would still personally say that this is still a good category for Phantom Pain. And then we have Rise of Tomb Raider, which admittedly also has some kind of, story issues, specifically with its main villain and some of the justifications of, like, some of the antagonists. But as far as Lara Croft's, sort of character building and her learning about her family and a lot of the side characters that are in this, I think it justifies a lot of those issues. And, this version of Lara Croft I find to be really compelling, especially since, the 2013 one I thought was really compelling in there, was a really compelling game in its own right. So, yeah, at least for me, this, I would definitely say, I'm surprised to not get a nomination. Although, to be fair, Life is Strange was a Square Enix game. This was also a Square Enix game, so it's like they probably didn't want to nominate too many of that, but who knows? But what I do know is that I know what the best narrative of 2015 is. And it should be pretty obvious with the one that I was kind of, talking about. So, best narrative for 2015 goes to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Let me start this off by saying this game has 40 ways on which it ends, which is an insane amount. So, you want to talk about a game where your choices actually matter? Witcher 3 is the game you want to look to, motherfucker. Don't you ever say that Telltale Games ever has impactful choices when a game like Witcher 3 has 40 distinct endings. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is your choice right there. It's branching storylines, even just kind of from between the beginning and the end, also have their own compelling ways in which are told. And really do give depth to our protagonist here, and even just the world itself, and just kind of the environmental storytelling and all that fun stuff. And, well, as I already mentioned, this is really the only true winner for this category. Let's be real here. Even though I respect the hell out of Metal Gear Solid 5, its story has its problems. So, there you go. But of course... Okay, that was a weird transition. Of course, we can't wrap up the night without talking about the Game of the Year. So, the Game Awards actually get it right this time, because, well, 2016 was an amazing year, but they had the worst option. It was Hoodie-itis, as I call it. Did they get it right for 2015? Well, as far as the picks, Bloodborne, Witcher 3, and Metal Gear Solid 5, I'd say are pretty big wins. As far as I'm concerned, those are arguably some of the best choices you could have probably chosen for 2015. And I've already explained a million times why. Bloodborne, of course, being the best, being one of the best RPGs of 2015 with its amazing art direction and its gameplay. The Witcher 3, of course, obviously already won best RPG. It has an amazing open world. It has amazing gameplay, story, branching paths, all that fun stuff. And, well, Metal Gear Solid 5 having an amazing open world in its own right as well as sort of, streamlining a few things that previous Metal Gear Solids kind of ignored to do, but also sort of, emboldening sort of some storytelling elements and having amazing stuff, other things to do besides the main quest lines. So yeah, those three games, hell yes. Easy picks for Game of the Year. Again, Goldie's gonna shiver whenever I say this. He might even cry when I say this, but no. Fallout 4 is not Game of the Year 2015. I already explained why. And even just putting my bias aside, I still can't in good faith put this in for Game of the Year, because this game had a lot of issues when it came out. This game was broken as fuck when it came out. People were like, there's tons of footage of a lot of the weird shit. Granted, yes, it's an open world, but guess what? Witcher 3 and Metal Gear Solid 5, they had little issues, and they were open worlds. So, and trust me, I've checked to make sure, and I never saw any glitch. Like, there were little to zero glitches on any of the footage for either of those two games. Fallout 4, there were dozens of glitches. So, as far as I'm concerned, on that basis, and also just on the basis of, at least in a lot of, people's opinions about Fallout in general, just sort of the weaker writing, just the sort of weaker shooting feeling guns. Granted, they changed the gun combat to where it feels more like a traditional shooter, but just nerfing all the guns because of it, people didn't like. So, yeah, like, I can't in good faith. Super Mario Maker is the most random game that they would have chosen for Game of the Year. What? Okay. Not that it's bad, but why is it here? That's like the most random game. If this was a mainline Mario game, that would make sense, but this is not a mainline Mario game. This is basically just like a mod. Like, yeah, this is basically just a mod tool game. It's a sandbox game. Which, normally, those wouldn't be nominated for Game of the Year. I don't know. Yeah, this was trendy quite a bit back whenever it came out. But I don't even know if you can play the original Mario Maker anymore. I think they shut down, like, the service, right? Because especially since this was stuck on Wii U hardware. Nintendo Switch has Super Mario Maker 2, so why would you go back to 1? So, yeah, no, I can't. So, what did they end up choosing, though? Well, thankfully, this is not a case of hootyitis for fucking once. And they decided to choose The Witcher 3, which, fair. Honestly, fair. But what would I have also nominated? Bloodborne, Witcher 3, and Metal Gear Solid 5 are obviously going to be nominated. But the other games I'm nominating, City Skylines and Rise of the Tomb Raider. It should come as no surprise that I do genuinely think that City Skylines is one of the best games to come out in around that time. It really was a standout title because of just its pretty, calm atmosphere and just being very cool. Like, and again, not every game that I play has to be like an action game. I can play a game that's a bit more on the low side and a bit more, admittedly, I guess you can say family friendly in this case, but just more palatable for everyone. And I think with City Skylines, it was able to achieve such great things during its run. And I have to respect the hell out of it for that. And, well, admittedly, I'm kind of surprised that Rise of the Tomb Raider wasn't nominated, because this game came out in October. Easily could have been able to have made it onto the list. Definitely better than fucking Super Mario Maker. That, again, that's the most random choice ever. Like, so I'm actually surprised the Game Awards didn't choose Rise of the Tomb Raider, because I feel like this would have been easily one of their type of games. But I guess it kind of did come out in an awkward time. It also doesn't help that there was that weird, like, exclusivity thing that was tied to Microsoft for this game that was kind of controversial, which, I mean, it doesn't really matter now, but, like, yeah, it was kind of annoying. But as far as, like, as a game itself, Rise of the Tomb Raider is a worthy choice for best game of 2015. But, well, if I'm going to be honest, it really is. As much as I love City Skylines, and like if I was being subjective, that would be like, you know, the easy one. I have to be kind of honest, it really is a battle between Witcher 3 and Metal Gear Solid 5. Because, well, those are just the best games. Because here's the other thing you have to consider. City Skylines has so much DLC, and I mean so much DLC, that it can be a bit overwhelming. And while, yes, these two games also have DLC, they're not as overwhelming. So that's kind of where my hesitancy comes from with City Skylines. But let's get into the final winner of the night. It may actually surprise you guys. But here we go. The winner of the best game to represent the game of the year, the award to the best, like to the game, like the award of Game of the Year 2015 goes to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. You guys are probably kind of surprised because I never talked about The Witcher before, like, this stream, except for, I think, I did in the Fictional Crush tier list. Okay. But only for the context of that. I never actually talked about The Witcher in proper. But, well, I mean, it says it right there. This is the only really good option here. I mean, it has the best open world, has the best gameplay, the best story, and it's just the best overall game. As much as Metal Gear Solid 5 is an amazing game, and it is an amazing game in so many respects. Like, it has an awesome, has actually multiple open awesome worlds. Now I think I just remembered it has 2 open worlds. It's not just Afghanistan. You go to Angola as well. I forgot about that. As much as like those 2 open worlds are amazing in Metal Gear Solid, and the base building is awesome, and the combat is awesome, the one crippling thing is its story, or at least the story aspects of its story. So in an objective sense, I have to give it to The Witcher 3. So, because like I said, it does everything right. And I have to give credit where credit is due. And honestly, this was the game that made a lot of people fall in love with CD Projekt Red. For better and for worse. Obviously, they would fuck up later on, but I can't take away just how much of an impact The Witcher 3 had in 2015. And, well, the Game Awards got it right, because, frankly, this year was so bad, so painful to research, that I had to gut multiple of our big categories. That's how bad this year was. And, well, just like with 2022, with Elden Ring. Elden Ring was one of those games that really did take the world by storm because no other game could. And, well, in 2015's case, The Witcher 3 was that same game. It was the game that took the world by storm when a bunch of other games just could not in that same year. And I have nothing but praise and respect for it. And it also really helps that, well, it's an open world fantasy game, and I do love open world fantasy games. And I am really excited that when I ever do play The Witcher 3, it will be an amazing experience. Yes, I'm confirming that I'm playing this game at some point. But yeah, that is the game of the year. But of course, let's recap. These are the winners. Best game by a new studio, Ori and the Blind Forest. Best action adventure, Metal Gear Solid 5, Fan of Pain. Best role-playing game, The Witcher 3. Best shooter game, Just Cause 3. Best sim strategy, City Skylines. Best remake remaster, Uncharted Nathan Drake Collection. Best art direction, Bloodborne. And the best narrative and the game of the year also went to The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt. So, as far as my top 10 personal favorites, or at least objective favorites, these are the games up here: Bloodborne, City Skylines, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Metal Gear Solid 5, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Wolfenstein the Old Blood, Ori and the Blind Forest, Helldivers, Just Cause 3, and Uncharted Nathan Drake Collection. And let's not forget about the Guilty Pleasures. This one's, if I remember, was a bit of a lengthy one. So let's, of course, go over here. I have to admit, I like Battlefield Hardline. Like, you know, like, I know that is coming as a surprise, but the multiplayer is good. The campaign sucks. Don't at me. Also, Heist is amazing in Battlefield Hardline. So yeah, but I just could not in good faith put this in the best shooter category. Same thing with Verdun, because Verdun, I actually really like. You know, World War One shooter actually predates Battlefield 1. But it can be a bit janky at points, and this game got a lot of shit when it came out because people thought that this was kind of a bit too cheap, and it did not help when Battlefield 1 came out. But at least this game has bots, so you can play like that, and there is a small but dedicated community. Then we have Zombie Army Trilogy, which I streamed actually, I think, like maybe once or twice, like a long time ago, like 5 years ago. It's another sort of Left 4 Dead style of game in the Sniper Elite series. So yeah, it's a spin-off of the Sniper Elite games. Just, you know, World War II Nazi zombie style. So it's okay. And then yeah, Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Again, I like the Victorian era setting does really carry this game, and its open world is very detailed, because that is the one thing that Assassin's Creed games always do right with, is their open worlds. Like, the detailing is always really damn good. It's just a shame that the story and the repetitiveness kind of drag it down. And then, well, Black Ops 3, again, if we were doing the zombies mode alone, that easily would have won the best shooter category. But since we're counting the entire game, because I have to count the whole game as a whole, I just could not, in good faith, put Black Ops 3 in the shooter category. Like, if it had a better campaign, and if its multiplayer was like that of a different Call of Duty, I would have, and I mean any other Call of Duty other than Advanced Warfare, it would have been a better game. But that concludes 2015's Caspian Game Awards. So I'm probably going to get some heat for this one, but at the end of the day, just keep in mind this is all my personal opinion. And if you agree or disagree, that's completely fine. Feel free to let me know in either comments or in the chat right next to me. But in any event, I hope you guys did enjoy this. If you guys did, make sure to hit that follow button down below and turn on the bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly when I'll be streaming. While you guys are at it, make sure to check out links down below as well, specifically Discord, SoundCloud, YouTube, all that fun stuff. If you guys haven't already, you can also hit the subscribe button. If you can't necessarily do that, that's completely fine. I'm just glad that you guys took time to watch this. But regardless of all that, though, make sure to share the stream to other people as well, and to continue being awesome people in the process. But until then, I'll see you guys on the next one. Until then, take care. Bye.